Welcome to the Money Made Human podcast. It celebrates at its heart the work of credit unions and their vital role in enriching our lives and communities. Brought to you by First Class Credit Union, each episode features insightful discussions revealing the meaningful impact that can be made through economic collaboration. Mostly, it's a collection of compassionate conversations about navigating life and the individual journeys we take. Hello friends, and welcome to Money Made Human, a podcast by First Class Credit Union. We're delighted today to have the CEO from the Chamber of Commerce in Glasgow. His name is Stuart Patrick CBE, and we're really delighted to have you. Woo!
Very nice to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. Look forward to our chat.
No, thank you. Thanks for being here. So I want to start off by asking you, Glasgow is 850 years old this year. What do you see it through your lens and your role? Do you see the city transforming? For any of our members listening that haven't been to Glasgow, how would you describe it?
Very good question, and it's a good time to ask that question. 850 years. We can't claim as a chamber to have been around for the full 850 years, but we have been around for 244 of them. So we have, yes, indeed, the chamber was born back in 1783. So we've had a history of being an independent members organisation in Glasgow for a good couple of hundred years, when so much has changed in what Glasgow has now become. But I would say that if there's anything that summarises the challenges of any developed city around the world right now, it's the post-2008 period after the great financial crash. So many countries, so many cities struggled with all the consequences of that. And indeed, households are still struggling with the consequences of that. And then to have, whether you liked it or not, Brexit and the consequences of Brexit, and then to have COVID, and then to have a significant increase in energy prices, you would expect any city, particularly a city that's gone through industrial change the way that Glasgow has done, to be struggling with some of the consequences. But it is worth remembering, and I mentioned the long history of the Chamber for a reason, because I think it's worth remembering that Glasgow was one of the very first cities in the world to experience and to, in fact, help to create the Industrial Revolution. So when it comes to the changing in life standards, life expectancy, standards of living over a period of 850 years, Glasgow's been a leading global impacting city since back in the days of the 17 and 1800s. So there's a lot to celebrate about what Glasgow has contributed. I know that there's a lot of discussion about the consequences of that too, but right now I think the story of Glasgow is one of responding to some of the major global trends, particularly in technology. If you might look at our city centre at the moment and think it's been in better shape, and I'm sure we can talk about that. But actually, around Glasgow city region, if you like, the 2 million or 1.8 million population that makes up the true labour market of Glasgow, Glasgow city region has been growing quite healthily against national averages, and we've been creating a whole new set of industries as a consequence of research going on in the universities, small companies, large companies investing alongside that research. And so that new industries like space communications or photonics or precision medicine or some aspects of advanced manufacturing, these are all bubbling up around the region, and a whole new set of companies are emerging as a consequence. So I actually feel quite confident at the moment that although Glasgow's taken a bit of a pummeling over the last 15 or so years, that actually we're responding quite well. It may not feel like that to a lot of households around the city, but I think the prospects, if we get things right, the prospects for the future look as if they could be quite good.
And from that, you say about the change in kind of landscape in the city centre, but as a positive, there's also those those large financial institutions that are playing a part in the heart of the financial district. You know, I guess I'm thinking about the big Barclays building and campus, JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley. There's a huge piece of infrastructure there centred around financial provision and financial institutions.
That is indeed correct. I'm not saying we placed a bet, but I think we saw the opportunity back in the late 1990s for Glasgow to be successful in nurturing financial services across the country, actually. And there was a decision made that we should have something we called the International Financial Services District. And I remember at the time, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, that BT put 50 million into broadband technology, that Scottish Enterprise and the City Council decided that collaboratively they would sell Glasgow's asset base. They would say that Glasgow was a strong source of skills for financial services. And you'd have to say that, okay, it took 20 years, and there were a variety of debates through that 20 years about how effective this was going to be. But 20 years on, all the targets for the International Financial Services District have been delivered. You, as you rightly say, you've got JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Barclays. Of course, you still have the presence of the major UK institutions, Virgin Money, Bank of Scotland, Royal Bank of Scotland, still playing an important role. The insurance industry is quite prominent in the financial services district. So there's a whole rich mix of financial services companies, very strong role for global technology hubs, which have software engineers in their thousands working along the Bruma Law, creating the new systems, the new apps, the new service offers from the financial services industry. So that, for us, it's almost as if we banked that, so to speak. We've taken that success and said, you know, we could probably do something similar with the new technology industries, in whether it's in digital, life sciences, advanced manufacturing. We've said we've learned from what we did with the IFSD, and we're asking, can we do it? It has to be done a different way. There are different motivations for investment in those industries, but nonetheless, we are in the process with innovation districts of doing much the same as we did with the International Financial Services District.
Does it help that we have two of the greatest universities in the city centre? You know, we have the University of Strathclyde and University of Glasgow. Does that help to bolster all of that?
Enormously. It's almost impossible to do it without them. Because on the one hand, they are, along with the Glasgow Caledonian University and with the college network, City of Glasgow College, University of West of Scotland, all of those institutions are creating the talent pipeline that makes Glasgow an attractive place for, clearly it was attractive, is attractive for the financial services, but it can now become attractive for those high technology industries that are growing so fast around the world, whether that's in renewables, advanced manufacturing, or, as I said, the photonics, space comms, etc. So the university is creating the skills is obviously a fundamental part of the city's offer, but obviously also the extent to which the predominantly, admittedly, Strathclyde and Glasgow Uni research offer. That's what makes the potential of an innovation district practically achievable, because if you don't have the research teams and the research disciplines in the universities, then it's difficult to see what the corporate and SME company world would have to invest in, what would attract them here. So it's unquestionably the case that the two research universities are providing us with, again, another steady pipeline of interesting research projects that are getting large corporates to consider what they might be able to invest alongside, and at the same time creating supply chains that help smaller companies to then grow and succeed in the city. Now, we're still at a relatively early stage of the growth of those new industries, but the signs are good. Over the last 2 years or so, we've been working particularly with UK government money to invest in projects that bring business and the universities alongside each other. But equally, travel the world, trying to do exports or attract inward investment, or get infrastructure supported by overseas investors. And again, it's the universities that are a critical component of the offer that we're making. And I travel quite a lot for the Chamber, trying to encourage export markets, particularly for our SME community. And almost invariably, you're going to interact with somebody from one of the university and college network, because they're out there in those markets, quite often to try and attract overseas students, but also to build up research partnerships and to engage in sometimes actually even developing overseas campuses in order to try and build up the presence around the world. So absolutely fundamental. You couldn't really succeed without them.
I'm really interested to ask you about how credit unions can help within all of that infrastructure, but I just wanted to ask, do we have an advantage in Glasgow in terms of our people? I know the key slogan that came out of, I think, the Commonwealth Games was "People make Glasgow," and it still feels like that. And I just wondered, is that a key advantage that we have as in terms of all that infrastructure, but we have heart and soul as well?
There are a couple of answers to that question, one of which is based on very clear data, which is that Glaswegians on average are better qualified.
Is that right?
Alongside, it's actually Scots more generally, but Glaswegians and folks from Edinburgh are near the top of the list in the UK for the number of folks in the population who have degree level qualifications or above. Mm-hmm. That makes the city incredibly attractive for investors to come and bring new projects into the city, or indeed for Glasgow-based companies to grow and stick at home. I think the other thing which grew up through the International Financial Services District experience was the appreciation that the turnover of staff for those investors in Glasgow was also lower. Okay. Because Glaswegians have a tendency to want to stick around their own patch, and quite rightly too. I mean, they want to, if they can make a home in their own city, and we are now providing more and more of the job opportunities for folks to do that, then the tendency is to do that. That's quite often because Scots have a tendency to go to the local university rather than to travel around the country. That might be changing a little bit at the moment, but that has traditionally been the case. That has made for not just the high level skills, but also the extent to which employers can rely on those skills to stick around longer than the average. The other thing I would say is that some of the data on visitors tends to buttress the argument that Glaswegians are unusually friendly, or above average friendly. Yeah, that's probably the right way of putting it. They're pretty cheerful with visitors, and it's usually one of the features of the city visitor experience that comes out strongly, that the interaction with people has been a genuine positive. Our transport networks might not get the same positivity, but our city centre is not looking quite at its best at the moment. But the people make up for it is one of the messages we hear back from visitors. So there's enough evidence to back the argument that people of Glasgow do make a difference, do make the difference. But there isn't really much point doing any of this work on economic development if it wasn't for the people of Glasgow. The whole purpose is that it actually does benefit the people of Glasgow and makes life in the city better. That's what we're driven by.
I'm so fascinated that you said the Chamber is more than 200 years old. I don't know why I was thinking it was a more recent thing. But can you give us a brief history of the Chamber and how it's come to life? And
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. 1783 was quite an important year historically, because that was the year that the United Kingdom lost the American War of Independence. And the merchants of Glasgow had built up most of their success by serving the east coast of at that stage United States, at that point the now independent United States, and that disrupted the flow of goods out to America. There was a There were bans on trading and so forth. So in other words, Glasgow merchants lost their market, and so no individual trader felt that they were in a position to do anything that was going to solve the problem. They wanted to look at new markets. They wanted to try and encourage the British government to change policies. There are a whole variety of things they felt that could be done, and I'll come to that in a minute. But they couldn't do them on their own. So the argument was they should come together. Chambers of Commerce was a relatively new concept at that time. So it's a concept that formulated largely through the 1700s. And so early 1780s, there weren't that many chambers of commerce. And in fact, Glasgow was one of the first in the English-speaking world. Alongside, I think Liverpool was an early one as well for the very same reason. And so the merchants gathered together and created the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce and Manufacturers in order to try and find alternative markets. And one of the first things that they wanted to do was to lobby the government to overturn the monopoly of the East India Company on trade with Asia. And that unfortunately took about, I think that must have taken 60, 65 years to achieve. They also wanted to abolish the Corn Laws. That was another of the big campaigns, early campaigns of the Chamber, which were subsequently abolished in 1846. Now, those Corn Laws had been created in such a fashion they protected the aristocracy and the landed classes of the country and made their grain more profitable. But it meant that manufacturers were worried that it also meant feeding their workforces was going to be significantly more expensive. So that was one of the reasons they went for the campaign. In fact, they won that campaign in 1846. And obviously, it wasn't just Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, it was a whole series of efforts to overturn that in the battle between, I suppose, the merchanting middle classes and the landed aristocracy. So the Chamber has played its role in some fairly fundamental shifts in how our country's history has evolved.
And now how many members do you serve now?
We have just over 1,000 members spread all across the Glasgow city region, all shapes and sizes, all sectors, lots, mostly SMEs, just by the very nature of how the economy works, as most companies in virtually any economy, but certainly in our economy, most companies are SMEs. But we do have 200-300 of the large corporates that are very present in the city. So most of the interests of the city's business community are represented in the Chamber's membership.
What can one of your members expect if they join the Chamber? What does that help them to do?
Well, we do survey our members, and we ask them what they particularly expect from us. And far and away, the most important thing for members is the interaction between members. It is the expectation that they will be able to meet with, and in some cases, sell to other members of the Chamber, or indeed other important parts of the business community in the city. So they're very interested in what our events programme looks like through the year, how we do influencing between members. And to a certain extent, it depends what you get from being a Chamber member. To a certain extent, it depends on what you put in. So there are various levels of membership that you can join, and the higher up the level of membership you buy, the more service you get, as you might imagine. Everybody does that. But you'll find that we are also perhaps less well known, although you'd expect given our history. International trade is a very important part of what we do. So we do some of what I think some might consider relatively dull international trade logistics work, particularly around trade certification, the documentation you need in order to get goods into overseas markets. We do quite a lot of international trade mission work with the help of Scottish Chambers of Commerce and the Scottish Government. We've been visiting about half a dozen markets pretty relentlessly since the turn of the century, and since around about the turn of the decade, I should say. So China, US, Germany, United Arab Emirates, Singapore is a comparatively recent one. So that again, to try and help companies to find their way into international markets. But we also do quite a lot of, I suppose, what you'd call the lobbying work that members expect us to do, both at the local level, encouraging investments and policies that will help Glasgow grow as an economy, but also to work with the Scottish Chambers of Commerce and the British Chambers of Commerce to affect how the two national governments set their policies. So, for example, just recently, the Scottish Parliament passed the Housing Act, which has rent controls in it, and there was a lot of concern within the property investment membership of our chamber about what that would do to incentives to invest in housing. And debate has been had, various proposals made, and as a consequence, there are some exemptions to the rent controls in new build, build to rent housing or new build mid-market rent housing, which will help to get a better supply of housing investment into the city, and that will have an impact on the city centre. So just as an example of a topic that we've been focused on discussion with politicians and senior civil servants in order to try and shape a piece of legislation to help the city rather than to hinder it. So that's a strong example of what the policy work does. And then finally, a lot of particularly larger companies get very interested in some of the work we do to influence key issues at the local and regional level. We do quite a lot of work on work experience placement, and we work with a lot of companies, both large and small actually, on helping young, particularly young, but not exclusively, to get opportunities to work with companies for short periods of time in order to get an experience of what the world of work looks like and what the opportunities look like. We also do a lot of work in net zero and the circular economy, encouraging good practice on climate change issues, and particularly the circular economy, because it's a much broader notion than net zero, and it's actually quite a sensible commercial option for a lot of companies to look at the way in which the circular economy could work for them, how they can contribute to more sustainable policies as a result. So that's a flavour of all the things you can expect if you become a member of the chamber.
What it does sound like is there's a community ethos sitting below that, where you have a network of support as well.
Yeah, very much so. I think on the basis that our mission, to go right back up to the top, what's the mission of the chamber? It is to help our member businesses to grow, but it's also to champion Glasgow as a place to do business, and therefore, in turn, to champion the economic growth of Glasgow. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of common interest, as there was back in 1783. There's a lot of common interest in achieving that part of the mission. So yeah, there's a lot of support from our member companies, to the extent that the member companies encourage us as a chamber to identify the projects they think are most likely to make change to Glasgow to make it successful. There's 10 of them that we've chosen. They're not our projects as a chamber, but mostly not. I mean, we're involved in some of them, but they're mostly either stakeholder or even some of the large members' projects. But it's our job then to raise their profile and try and encourage decisions to be made that will help them happen. So yeah, there is a community spirit behind achieving that. But there's also a community spirit of helping each other in more simple ways to grow business.
I can't help but think when you were talking about that, but also the history and the origin, that there must be a role for credit unions to play within the infrastructure. Glasgow's one of the capitals in the UK for credit unions, and we, First Class, are one of many credit unions that service the area. We are an industrial credit union, so we support employers, we work with trade unions, we work with organisations like Royal Mail and BT, but there are other important credit unions that might serve a small community within the city. And we can also help businesses in terms of commercial lending. But I wonder if there's a common denominator in that we also support local organisations. Our social impact plans are huge across the city. And I guess that will be a common objective or goal for your members too, that we're all doing a lot for the city itself?
For sure. I think there's a tradition in Glasgow that stretches from credit unions through housing associations and through a whole host of third sector or community enterprises, social enterprises more widely. There's such a depth of history attached to that. Would you call it self-help? I guess it's the extent to which we understand the issues in our local community. We understand the issues that our local neighbourhoods face, and as a consequence, we're best placed to at least identify what needs to be done, even if we can't always have the scale of resources in order to tackle them. But where we can raise the resources and where we can collaborate together in order to try and tackle issues on a local neighbourhood, a household, or a small business level, then yeah, Glasgow has a very strong tradition of doing that, and all to the good, I have to say. So yeah, very happy to put in a good word for the role of credit unions in both local communities and in serving particular markets.
My goodness, we would love that. We are approaching International Credit Union Day on the 16th of October, and our campaign locally is Choose Us, in line with credit unions. But we can help your members, we can help the people they're serving, we can help the local community. So we'd love to be part of your story and journey. I wanted to ask, you're the CEO at the Chamber, and I wondered what's your journey to that role? And
yeah,
I suppose I have a second question on the back of that, which is, what's informed your values to enable you to do your role?
Great. Gosh, there's a lot in that one, that last one actually, about the values. The journey is relatively simple. I started off as I'm from Greenock, so I've travelled the full distance of 25 miles my career from my hometown to Glasgow. And I studied at Glasgow University, and I've also studied at Strathclyde University. So both universities are important for another reason, certainly for me anyway. And my first job was as an accountant with what's now EY. When I started, it was a completely different name and a completely different organisation, but it has sort of transformed into EY over the years. And I qualified as a chartered accountant, but I wasn't really cut out to be a chartered accountant in practice, I felt at the time. So maybe I think it was after about 6 years, I thought I needed something a bit more to my motivations. So I joined an organisation called the Government Initiative, which was a small local economic development agency supported at that time by the regional council, the district council, and this is important to me, the Scottish Development Agency, which had been formed back in the 1970s as an economic development agency designed to change the economic fortunes of Scotland. And I served that organisation for a couple of years and got really interested in the whole role of Scottish Development Agency, which in turn became Scottish Enterprise. So I joined Scottish Enterprise in the early 90s, roughly a year after it had been formed. And I was with that for 17 years. Ultimately, or penultimately, there was a final role I played there, but most of my time had been on the Glasgow economic challenge, the transformation of Glasgow, the difficulties Glasgow had been facing, dramatic difficulties. And so our whole role in what was Glasgow Development Agency as part of Scottish Enterprise was about trying to solve those problems as best we could. And ultimately, I think it was John Swinney abolished the local enterprise companies that included what had been Glasgow Development Agency. And I was getting put more into Scottish matters, and in all honesty, I was more interested in that Glasgow story, the Glasgow issue, and urban economic development. So that's when I left Scottish Enterprise and joined Glasgow Chamber of Commerce as the chief executive, and working in partnership with everybody in Glasgow City region to see if we could keep that journey of transformation, change and growth going in Glasgow in whatever way we could. So that's what my journey has been. But the values question is it's a really interesting one for me, because most of my career, in fact, all of my career has been based around the Glasgow City region geography. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to build a career close to home. And so my values are all based on issues about how you succeed, how you contribute close to home. I'm very strong on local measures and local action, local power, the ability at the community and at city and at regional level to shape the way things happen in your patch. So, policy terms, I'm all about the devolution of powers to local levels in order for things to happen. But I suppose on a more human basis, that delegation, understanding how to help people to grow, how to become more experienced, how to expand their talents. That's a fundamental value of mine, again, is giving people the opportunity to stretch themselves and take on responsibilities as quickly as possible, which in turn has an amazing impact on your ability as an organisation to succeed if you do that. So there's a couple of things that are in the back of my mind as I go about my business.
Where do you get that fundamental value from? Where do you get that human quality from? Who has helped you build that?
Oh, it has to be your family. Really, at the end of the day, it's the nature of the household you're brought up in. There's no doubt. I had both my parents are gone now, but I had a very, very supportive family background in Greenock, and of course, actually that experience, because Greenock as a town is one of those towns that has really suffered the consequences of industrial change. So seeing that through a household lens and understanding consequences of that and exploring how you respond to that as a household has undoubtedly had an impact on what I think about and what I was thinking about as I was getting back into the world or getting into the world of work. The other thing I think was so important was the attitude towards education, the importance of education, and what education would do for you as an individual, but also what it does for the community in which you are educated. So my school was a very significant part of who I became. It's no longer with us. It was called the Greenock Academy, and in the West End of Greenock, and it's now all sorts of school mergers occurred. Gosh, I can't remember now how long ago, but it's now become a different school unit. But I can't think of another institution outside the household that has had more impact on me than my early schooling.
When you say you see the changes in industrial evolution over the years and that plays an impact, I can resonate with that. I'm a Lanarkshire steelworker's daughter.
Indeed, right? Yeah, quite.
So I get that, and I wonder if that's a similar story with you in Greenock, and the origins of shipbuilding there and heavy industry. Did that play a part in did that seep into your ethos along the way?
Well, I suppose in the sense that you're looking back at the days when I remember if you were to try and take a car in the 70s or 80s, late 70s, to try and drive up to Glasgow, if you timed it wrongly, you could be sitting for half an hour as the yards emptied out.
Yep.
Until all the folks had got out of the yards and gone to wherever they were going. So that sense of vibrancy around Greenock was still palpable in the early 70s when I was young, and the loss of that, watching that disappear over a decade and a half, and seeing just how limited the opportunities then became for households and families in Greenock, and the impact it had across all levels of society in that town. Growing up in a town where the hope was being gradually extinguished, of course, has an impact on what your hopes and aspirations are going to be. If you were to come from if you were living in Silicon Valley in the US, I'm sure your values are going to be very, very different as a consequence.
But it's amazing, it seeps in, doesn't it? And I think it helps you to serve others with that in the back of your mind in a way.
Well, in the sense that it's back to what I was saying about the formation of the chamber. We were indeed all in it, right in it together, and you weren't going to solve anything on your own. You had to solve things through collaboration and engagement, whether it's groups of families or working within the context of the education system or whatever. Your solutions weren't going to come purely from your own efforts. Mm-hmm. It was always going to be a collaborative endeavour.
And Stuart, you're a commander of the British Empire, a CBE. What was your award given to you for? Is that to do with your chamber work?
Yeah. I got that for services to business and to the Glasgow economy, I think was nice. The wording. And I was particularly pleased to see the word Glasgow in the citation. I felt particularly proud of that. So yeah, it's a reflection of all that we've been discussing.
Was that a proud moment for you?
Oh, yeah, of course. Unfortunately, my parents had both gone at the time, but my brother and my son came down with me to Buckingham Palace for the ceremony. And yeah, it's hard not to be affected by that.
What would your parents have said?
Yeah, they would probably have said, "Don't get above yourself." That's all very nice, but what are you going to do next? Well, it would have been that kind of discussion, face to face. There wouldn't have been any fawning over
humble.
It would have been more along the lines of, yeah, okay, can't see how you got that, but hey ho, if that's what they want to do, great. But what are you going to do next?
I love the way when you're talking about your work in Glasgow, you used a little phrase called the Glasgow story. And I love to hear it like that, because it is a city that transitions and transforms. What do you see that's coming up in the next 4 to 5 years that might take Glasgow even further?
Well, phenomenal amount of opportunity for Glasgow if we can find the support, I think, outside Glasgow to help make it happen. So, for example, just over the last couple of weeks, City Council's leader, Susan Aiken, announced the formation of a direct marketing organisation. It can sound quite a dull, unremarkable thing to be doing. You're pulling together a team actually of existing people. They're not bringing in lots of new people. It's people who are already there, but bringing them together in a coordinated and coherent team that's there to tell the story of Glasgow's economy, to get across the message that Glasgow actually is a remarkable place to invest and a remarkable place to grow a company, or to visit for that matter. And so we've been pretty good at that over the years, but over time, certain decisions are made for good reasons at the time, but gradually the impact was diminishing because it wasn't as coordinated as we needed to be. So the launch of that direct marketing organisation means, I think, we're going to be able to get the story out there now of how strong Glasgow's innovation economy is becoming. Mm-hmm. We're just back from a trade mission to Singapore, and in that mission we had eight small companies. Some of them were very high technology components or products and services, I should say, from renewable energy, in digital and artificial intelligence, in semiconductor technologies, and a variety, in other words. And all of them doing something that is novel in one way or another, something unusual, different, and unique. And we are, well, it was difficult. If you were to ask me the question about our technology and innovation economy 20 years ago, I would have struggled to say how vibrant that was. No question that has changed now. There's, instead of there being a handful of companies engaged in what you might regard as the sort of cutting edge of technology, we've now got hundreds of companies involved. The one that I think cut through strongest in the last 5 or 6 years was the pocket satellites Glasgow building more satellites than any other city outside of the United States or outside of California. And that was based on CubeSats, small satellites, the likes of AAC, Clyde Space, Spire Global, etc. That whole industry is growing and growing, and there's more and more in space and space comms. But alongside that, we can tell similar stories about advanced manufacturing, and a lot of that is about the old engineering skills coming forward in a new way. So whether that's Howdens or Weir's or Rolls-Royce or Babcock's, or most notably recently BAE Systems, and winning a £10 billion order from the Norwegian government for the current generation of frigates. Yeah. That whole opportunity for Glasgow is just beginning to, I'm not saying explode. I would love if it did explode into huge growth rates. We are a developed economy. We're going to get nice, steady, but helpful growth rates. But we can now point, instead of saying 20 years ago, financial services is looking good, we can make more out of that. We can now point to at least another half dozen different disciplines, different industrial disciplines, business disciplines, and say, yeah, we've got some real strengths in that. So the growth of the innovation economy over the next 5 years, and the ability through the direct marketing organisation to sell that, to get that investment in, to attract more talent into the city, I think that's really showing signs of real promise.
It's exciting times, and I hope the credit union sector, we can support the people of Glasgow underneath all of that. We're trying to develop a very human story about that.
Yeah.
And we're here for them and here for you.
Absolutely. Because I think one of the biggest challenges, we need the success in order to be able to achieve all the outcomes we want for Glasgow. And one of the biggest outcomes that we collectively, I think, want for Glasgow is that the opportunities for Glaswegian households to thrive grows as fast, if not faster, than the economy itself. And that has been the biggest challenge as yet undelivered, is that although there are a lot more jobs around than there were late 90s when that was the big cry, there aren't enough jobs. Sonny, if you want me to do well, how are you going to get more jobs into the city? I think we've been gradually achieving that, to the point actually where a lot of the business members are worried about skill shortages rather than whether they've got enough jobs to provide the opportunities for Glaswegians. I think finding the ways of helping Glaswegian households to overcome the barriers they face, either economically, medically, socially, getting that connection between Glasgow communities, Glasgow households, Glasgow families, and those growing industries is I think the biggest challenge that we face. Yeah,
here.
Yeah, and it's absolutely organisations like yourself that are going to be the ones most likely to make that happen.
I mentioned at the start, we're lucky in Glasgow. We've got all those significant financial institutions in town. The new Virgin Money building, it's awesome. We've got the different campuses around. But we can coexist with them. We offer a different option, and we offer it to all. So it's not just for people of low income, it's for aspirational families. It's affordable, accessible, ethical, so we're here. We'd love to play a part. And Stuart, I've got some questions from the team, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
Some of them are life questions, some of them are work related, but I don't know what the questions are. So
okay.
Give me a number 1 to 7.
All right, okay. We'll go with 5.
Number 5. Oh, this is a great question. When you walk through the city, what reminds you most of why your work is important?
Gosh, what's it? Yeah, there are probably 2 things that whether I would say my work is important or not is another matter. But that get me every time I'm walking through the city, there are things that get me, and it is one of the issues about living in the city. I do live in the city, so you never feel as if you're quite relaxed, because there's always something that you're feeling, I wonder if I can do anything about that.
Yeah.
And what the issue that gives me the most pleasure is when I see development coming out of the ground, or the refurbishment of an old historical property into something new, if it's fallen on hard times. So it's seeing the fresh come out of the ground, or the fresh being presented as part of the old. The thing that gives me the most frustration is seeing those parts of the city where it just hasn't happened yet, where something has fallen into dereliction, where something is in need of some tending. But just as a tiny wee thing that really bugs me every time I'm wondering, because it is a joy to look up in Glasgow. It's always one of the cliches of Glasgow. If you're really going to appreciate it, look up and see the architecture.
Yeah.
But quite often you'll look up, see the architecture, and you'll also see the buddleia growing out of the guttering in just about every building around the city. If there's one thing I'd like to see is building owners, I know it's expensive, it can be a real hassle, but get that buddleia off your building, because it will do nothing but damage over time. But it's the joy of seeing these, both the brand new and the refurbishment of the old for new uses. That's what I get the most pleasure out of.
Brilliant. Give me another number. So we've got 6 left.
All right, well, I'll go with number 2.
Okay, so would a speaker's corner in Glasgow be a good idea, a bit like the one that's in Hyde Park in London? I think we do that.
Yeah, I think we've got speakers' corners everywhere. I don't think you need a special one. Well, I can imagine Glasgow Green being a great spot for someone to hold out, but Glaswegians don't have any difficulty expressing their opinions.
No, this is true. And give me one more.
Okay, we'll go with number 7 then.
Oh, this is a life question.
Okay.
Simply put, what brings you the most joy in your life?
Dinner with the family, probably. Nice. I just had a dinner last night with the family. It's the most laughing, the most satisfaction, I think, just in terms of sharing the stories of what you've done the week before. That has to be the best moment in any week. That and watching a really, really good tennis game. I think that's probably does it.
Perfect. Stuart, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you about Glasgow. I mean, there's so much to talk about. It likely needs another episode down the line. Thank you for joining us on the podcast, but also thank you for your service to the city. And I think what really came across there is your endeavour to make our city better. And we thank you for that. Keep credit unions in mind in terms of the role we can play. We can help, for sure. Choose us.
Absolutely. Well, and good luck to First Class Credit Union for all that you're aiming to achieve. And I'll keep my eye out then for Credit Union Day. You said the 16th. The
16th of October, International Credit Union Day. Our message simply to everyone around us is choose us. Choose your local credit union. Yep.
Choose us. I'll make sure that we've said something from the Chambers.
Thank you. We would love that. Thank you so much. Thanks for all the work you're doing. Pleasure to have spoken with you today. Stuart Patrick CBE, everyone. Yay!
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Money Made Human podcast. We're grateful to spend time with you and hope you enjoyed it. If you want to join a credit union, choose us. With love, until the next time, First Class Credit Union.